All right, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Julie Mickleberry, and I'm the Associate Director for Alumni Affairs, where our vision at the Alumni Association is to be a reason why people choose to attend UCSB. Tonight's Gaucho Academy features a job search expert who has written a book that breaks down the job search, which we all know can be grueling, into a step-by-step process that will help dazzle employers and land your next job. Before I introduce Dave, I do have some housekeeping items to share with the audience. As an attendee, you can submit questions using the Q&A function throughout the webinar. We encourage you to do so. We will have time at the end for questions. And in addition to a short Q&A, we will be giving away 5 copies of Dave Parker's book, which is really exciting. So thanks, Dave, for doing that for us. So stay tuned. The webinar is also being recorded, folks. So if you miss a tidbit of really fantastic information, you can always go back and rewatch, which is fantastic. So now I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Dave Parker. He is an alumnus. He's the Executive Director of Career Development and Alumni Relations at the Bryn School right here at UCSB. And he's also the author of Slam Dunk Job Search. And here are a few fun facts about Dave. Dave has directed career development and alumni relations at Bryn since its founding. He has over 25 years of experience in human resources and career development fields. He received his BA in economics, magna cum laude, from the University of California, Santa Barbara. He has an MBA from California State University, Long Beach, and an MS in counseling and guidance from California Lutheran University. He is also a former UCSB tennis player. Go Gauchos! So there's a lot more I could share about Dave, but I want to make sure he has enough time to share his valuable job search knowledge with all of you. So I'm going to hand it over to Dave now. Dave, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours. I am now going to exit the webinar for a moment.
Great. Thanks, Julie. And thanks to your entire team. Really appreciate it. And let me go and share the presentation. See if this is. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thrilled to be here and to have the opportunity to talk about a recently published book, which was published in the end of February. And it was pretty much a 7-year process that I went through and finally came out. And my goal, and I'll show you the book here. And it is a pretty hefty book. It's about 374 pages and takes people through a 6-step process. The book, in terms of the reviews that have come through, people have said that it's even though it's a longer book, it's very reader friendly, very clear. There's a lot of different bullets and pull quotes and checklists and different things that are a lot easier to read. And the book started because years ago I had gone through the job search process, and I was doing everything that I thought was the right thing to do, and things weren't working, and I wasn't landing my ideal jobs early in my career. And so I knew what it felt like to not get your ideal job, and it feels pretty bad. And so that's one thing that I wanted to have people avoid, was going through that same process, and that's what we tried to incorporate here at the Bryn School as well. And then I wanted to change the process so that people had more control over what they were doing during the job search, and to make it more effective. And really, a lot of it came down to making it less stressful. And so I wanted to provide diagrams, checklists, tactics, and steps. There's a number of diagrams that are in the book that really help people visualize things, so it's a lot easier. And then the other thing was to have a broader reach and to give back to the community. And so this book wasn't written to make a lot of money for myself at all, or do anything like that. It was actually written to give back, to help people, and to actually any proceeds that come in to be able to give that back to various areas, including the UCSB and various departments on campus, and then the arts, sports, environmental education communities. So that's a driver of a lot of what I do. And here's being that it's a longer book and has a number of steps, I'm going to move through fairly quickly, just so that we can get to questions at the end. So bear with me as I take you through this process, and I'm going to give you just a little glimpse of maybe each of the steps, so that you'll have an idea of what a job search or a slam dunk job search might look like. But here's the question that really, where it comes down to it in a nutshell, is how do you elevate your job search performance above your competitors and land your ideal job? While no one can guarantee you will land your ideal job, you can follow a process that will considerably elevate your job search performance above your competitors. And so that's what the book's all about, is how do you take it to the next level? And you should always assume that at least one candidate that you're competing against is more qualified than you. And if that's the case, what do you need to do above and beyond to land that job offer? And so it came to 6 steps. It came down to 6 steps that form the process. And these steps start with career design, going to success mindset, market ready, getting things ready. The whole bottom 3 steps are really the foundation that then set you up to go through the relationship team, the competitive commitment, and the slam dunk, all really there established to seal the deal and land the job offer. And so you've got this foundation, and then it moves along into, okay, how do we then go and close the deal? So the interesting part about this is this wasn't in the book to begin with. And I kept coming back to it, and I kept saying it's not working. It doesn't make sense in my mind that the career design piece isn't here. I love this piece, but I was like thinking, okay, we're just going to go right to this person knows what they want. They're going to go after it. But the problem is a lot of people don't know what they want to do. And what you have to do to conduct the type of job search that I'm talking about is you have to have a basic idea of what your destination is. And you need to think about that. And then what you need to do is really reverse engineer back to your ideal career path and the job you're going to pursue now. And that's done by reaching out to people and who are really in the types of jobs you want to be in down the line, and getting their advice on where you ought to start. And it goes into a lot more detail, but in this case, it's only going to be one slide. And so I want to move on to the success mindset. So the other thing that's really critical in a job search is you have to understand the playing field. And if you don't understand the playing field, and a lot of what's out there just isn't the right way to think. And you go through and you think, okay, I go to these interviews and I practice some interview questions and I go through it and I put my documents together. And where do I get my documents? I look online and I look at examples of what are online. I copy those sort of same examples. And what happens is everybody starts sounding the same way. And when I was a recruiter at a Fortune 500 company, I did a lot of recruitment on campuses. And at the end of the 8 hours that I would go through, I was to write evaluations on each of the students. And most of them, I couldn't remember what was said until I looked at my notes. But the people that mixed things up and asked different questions and responded in a different way and had different icebreakers and asked different questions at the end and send customized thank you notes and different things like that. And they brought it to life, and those were memorable. And so this gets you to start thinking the right way as you move through the process. And I just have 2 here. There's 12 different paradigm shifts in a sense that I cover in the book. But the first one is, or one of them in there, I don't know if it's the first one, is instead of procrastinating during your job search, look for ways to make the job search process engaging and inspiring for you and employers. And I'll tell you, going back to when I was taught how to do a job search, no one ever told me I could be creative, inspiring, and different. It always had to be kind of the same thing. And so that is just not the right way to go about it. And so here's just an example And but there's many more examples of this and many more throughout the book about how do you make things more engaging and inspiring. Well, you look for ways to help solve the employer's problems by recommending changes and improvement strategies. You can connect with hiring committee members by sharing something you have in common with them based on your LinkedIn research. You take calculated risks and see what happens. Maybe you recommend changes to a program or initiative, incorporate a unique story and see how they react to it, or send a video thank you message after an interview. You consider bringing a relevant report or paper you wrote and share it with the hiring committee members during an interview to see how they react. Create something for the employer that demonstrates your skills. Share a portfolio of your most impressive work. And maybe design a visually appealing, professional, and targeted website that you would share with the employer. So what this is doing, and for those of you that have a lot of stress and anxiety, and we all go through that, especially in the job search process, focusing on these types of things. What am I going to do to make this inspiring? What am I going to do to impress the employer? What am I going to do to really make it interesting for me as well? Those take the focus off of the internal piece and put the focus on the external piece and really help remove a lot of that stress as you start to focus on these different things. Okay, and another mindset, instead of thinking that job search means searching and applying for jobs online, think of your job search as a process where you connect with decision makers, seek advice, develop relationships, and tap into people's emotions. And so the question is, why is this important? And one of the things we always go through is we say, okay, apply for jobs. So what that means is most people are sitting down on the computer, they're looking up job postings, and then they're applying rather than they're really going out there and connecting with people. And the question is, why is it important that they're connecting with people and not just sitting on the computer and submitting applications for jobs? So this iceberg is an example. And an example of this was a big brand company that I talked to, and I said they had 3 really good brand candidates that came out, and I said, what was the deciding factor on who you hired? And the person said it came down to who reached out to us before the position was even posted. And that's what it came down to, because they were all so good. It was who showed interest in the company before the position was posted. Okay. So really important on that. Then the market ready step is really to prepare to compete effectively for your ideal job. And so in this step, you're really going to assess your marketability, figure out how well you match up with the market, what the market demands. And that's by talking to people, getting advice on where are some gaps that you have, how can you build those up, how can you overcome those, and determine what separates you from your competitors. And then you're going to follow a simple framework for communicating your value, the slam dunk triangle offense. And all of this is going to feed back into your documents and your platforms, and really even into your interview process, which is important. And so then the slam dunk triangle offense is really, these are the 4 things that most companies are looking for. They're looking for, are you interested in the position? Are you interested in the company? And do you have a compelling reason why? 2, do you have the core credentials to do the job and do it well? Those 2 things are what most people are going to bring. If you get to an interview, that's what most people are going to have. That makes you competitive. The uniqueness, what do you bring that other people don't, other candidates aren't going to bring, that the company values? And fit. Do we have good rapport and chemistry? Have you done this work before? Have you worked with these types of people before? Those 2 things are what seal the deal. The 2 other things are what actually make you competitive. So it's important when you go through this. Any qualification type of question, you could go through this and answer the question based on this triangle offense. Okay. And then the relationship team step is where you're forming long-lasting professional relationships. You seek advice, become more marketable, connect with decision makers, and open the door to your target organizations. This is a pretty significant part of the book. Way too much to go into, but there's a few things that are important. And one is, and we just talked about it, is get backdoor access. Don't be applying for positions, but ensure you get yourself and your documents in front of the hiring manager. It's important that, and here's an example, was at a conference and I talked to somebody that he was hiring for a position. They were actually hiring 2 people for it. And he had said that 150 people applied, and only 2 people reached out directly to the hiring manager after they applied. And those 2 people they hired. So you have to get your documents or get yourself in front of the hiring manager, especially in these jobs that are really competitive. And that means you apply through the online portal, but then you also send a more hard-hitting email cover letter directly to the hiring manager. And then you attach maybe the formal documents, cover letter and resume there, and put your best foot forward and get right in front of the hiring manager, because they're the ones that are going to pick up things that a recruiter's not going to pick up, and they don't go by these rigid requirements. And they may bring you in for some really strange reason, and it could just be that you reached out to them and did something that was different. And then the book does get rid of the informational interview name. It's a name that a lot of people know is kind of a bait and switch type of tactic. And so what it's replaced with is a brief question and answer advising sessions, which really are you're asking questions, going to people and going to ask for advice and ask for quick questions. And the book goes through a lot of that process and gives you examples and everything else. But this thing about going in and asking for an informational interview where people know it's going to take a lot of time is pretty outdated that way. Okay. And then the competitive commitment is where you conduct a quality job search from start to finish by excelling at the basics across the board. And this is important. And this came up many years ago when I was in here with the brand students and going through it, because you would see so many people have errors and mistakes along the way. And so if you do the basics well across the board, you will often come out ahead in the end. And the reason why is because most people make mistakes along the way. So if you can do things solid from beginning to end, you're probably going to stand out. Now, that's not where the book stops, though. It goes into the slam dunk stage, which is how do you now elevate it up? But that basic stage needs to be there. And as the number 3 says, you need to be good before you can be great. And in this case, you want to be even better. You want to be remarkable, which is where the slam dunk piece comes in. And so this would mean that you submit competitive documents, you interview at a competitive level, you be prepared for anything and everything. As a recruiter, I would look at all the peripheral moments. What went on outside of the interview was much more important in my eyes than what went on in the interview. Most people compete or prepare for a 1-hour interview, but they become themselves when they're outside of that interview process. And so you need to be aware that you're on all the time. And so there are a lot of tools out there too, in terms of your writing and everything else. One thing that I developed years ago was an antique store editing approach that works extremely well. And what it does is, instead of looking documents globally, it forces you to look at documents systematically and go down, and there's a checklist that you can go through. And it picks up most of the errors, because what you do is you look at everything and you go through it. Whereas when you actually go through, like you're going through an antique store, you tend to look globally and you miss a lot of things when you go through the store. But when you break it down into compartmentalized things that you want to look at, you see a lot of those things when you go around. And then if you change it, you see more of it as you go through. And it's the same thing on a resume that way. Okay. And then the slam dunk step is where you're implementing tactics to help you stand out, seal the deal, and land your ideal job. And this is really where it all started. And this was based on some experience that I had, where I was put in some situations where the odds were completely against me, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna make it. I'm either gonna get the offer, or I'm gonna make it a very difficult decision for the hiring committee members. And so that led to a number of the things that came up, and started to think that way. And it came up when I would say organically, when I had somebody in here and I was talking to them, I would say, okay, what are you going to do to make your moving on in the interview process a slam dunk? What are you going to do to make sure that you move on, or you get the job offer? Okay. So if you get anything out of this is what I want you to remember, is that what if you weren't meant to be like everyone else? So when you go through the job search process, don't think like you need to conform to everything everybody else is doing. And I think that's really important. The better companies want people that are going to fit in and stand out. What they do is they want people to fit in with the people that are in the organization, with the culture, but they also want people that bring some diversity and bring something different that they value. So, and those, now, not all companies are good companies, but the better companies are going to want to do that. So you need to bring that. You need to show how you're different. What are you going to bring, and what's that personality that you're going to bring out? Okay. So when you get to any stage, this is the question you want to ask. What can I do during this stage to all but guarantee I move on to the next stage and get or get the job offer? So if you're your final interview, you want to get the job offer, and maybe you'll get the job offer even before that way. Okay. So this is another thing I want you to remember, is that there is no limit to how high you can elevate your job search performance. It's completely up to you. So you can bring in so many different things. And here's an example. When you look at this, 15% is the amount of a message people remember 3 days later when it's delivered without a visual. 65% the amount of a message people remember 3 days later when it's delivered with a visual. Okay? Without a visual, with a visual. So what does that tell you? It tells you somewhere along the line you need to give the employer a visual and make sure there's something there. And that could also mean in an interview, what you do is you don't have vague responses. You paint a picture in somebody's mind. You tell a story. You bring it to life. You talk about the setting. You bring that, and the more you can describe it, it will start to come to life in the person's mind, and they'll remember it. So it's not just on paper and everything else. So you can go with graphics. You can go with through social science studies that have been done, and you can take it about as far as you want to take it. And so what the book does is lay out a lot of those different things that you can do and how you should think when you go through it. But there's many more things that aren't even covered in the book. So what it comes down to is these moments of separation, as I call it. And what you have is you have a number of moments of separation throughout the job search process. And you have a decision at each of those touch points about, do I be brilliant at the basics, which you need to be. You need to be brilliant at the basics, but do I also add on, do I be different and memorable? And now there's 6 different principles that are in the book, and I didn't want to bring those up because I know I wouldn't have had time to go through them. But those principles, 5 of them, the last one is be different and memorable. The 5 other ones are all from professionalism, think like a salesperson, act like an artist in terms of, who's the audience and how do I adjust what I do for them, extraordinary customer service, going above and beyond expectations. Those all come in, and those are all really, they don't involve a lot of risk. Most companies are going to value that, and most people are not going to do that during the job search process. And so those are go into detail on those there. Okay. So here, I'm not going to go into each one of these, but these are moments of separation that most job search processes have. And as you go through it, communicating your brand through your promotional avenues, reaching out to the hiring manager and other contacts, submitting your application materials for a job, and then on through, arriving at the interview, talking with company employees around the building prior to the interview, answering interview questions, closing the interview, leaving the interview, sending a thank you note. So I had a person in my office just 2 days ago, and she wasn't closing the deal at the end, and she was these big companies. And so what I did is I went through and I said, let's break it down for every single thing. If you have a Zoom interview, we're gonna talk about your background. We're going to talk about what are you wearing. We're going to talk about how you place yourself on the screen. So you're up high on the screen and not real low, so you project confidence. We walked through every single thing, and we made sure that she was doing it the basics well. And then we were looking for, where do we add some novelty? Where can we add something that would be maybe the background would be something that would create a conversation. Okay. So no longer will you merely go through the motions. You are now taking ownership in the process. And so this is another thing that I want you to remember is, I want you to take control, and I want you to come up with these things that are going to set you apart. And so as I go through the next 12 things here really quickly, just think about this, there's many other things you can come up with on your own. The little things are the big things. It doesn't need to be difficult. And this example is Sarah Blakely, who is the founder and CEO of Spanx She did a Success Magazine business interview, and they asked her, what are 4 words that describe you? And she said, courageous, innovative, and I forget the other one. It was maybe creative. And the fourth one was tired. And then she said that a number of years ago, the fourth one would have been funny, but I'm too tired to be funny. And so the question there is 3 days later, what would you remember? You would remember tired. You wouldn't remember innovative and I couldn't even remember the third one. So you can see how you wouldn't even remember that. And so what it means is if you get a question about your strengths, come up with one strength that's different, that leads to a story, or where they're like, wow, we've never heard that before. And it brings you to life, and it makes you different. The other example is with a candidate with a big, it was a Fortune 500 company, and she ended up getting hired. And I went back to the hiring manager and said, why did you hire Mia over the other ones? And the person said, she said, it was how she answered the phone when we called. I think it was either to set up the appointment or it called for it was over the phone interview or something. And she said, hi, this is Mia. How can I help you? And she said, all the other candidates said hello or hi, and that was it. But they wanted somebody that had a customer service approach. And so it can just be one word that makes a difference. It can be one approach that makes a difference. It doesn't have to be difficult. Here's another idea. Add a testimonial under each of your references on your formal reference sheet. I've never seen that before. It's something that I came up with thinking each stage, how can you separate yourself? So you have a quote under each one. So maybe they don't even need to call the references. They just read those and say, oh my gosh, we need to hire this person. And it's a quote from that person, from that particular reference. And then always add a closer to your reference sheet. Somebody doesn't have to be somebody that's 100% related to what you do, but somebody that's going to say, you are crazy not to hire this person. You have to hire this person. They're fantastic. You need to make sure you have somebody on that's going to say that. And then curiosity statements. Those are statements that I talk about that in the book about throwing out elevator pitch and doing something that's more natural, which are curiosity statements that would be things like, I developed a innovative or unusual process or way to break into an overseas market, and that had never been broken into. And I was an intern, and I broke and by the end of the internship, we were able to break into that market in Germany. So what it is it's that state-of-the-art, unusual process, cutting edge. And so then somebody comes, well, tell me more about that. That's interesting. How did you do that? What did that take? Okay. And then say thank you and treat everybody well, even the parking attendant, receptionist. When I was a recruiter, I would go and ask the people, the receptionists, and anybody I could ask, how did this person treat you? How were they? What did they do? And that type of thing. These peripheral moments are key for recruiters to find out if they should hire someone, because that really tells them about that person's true character. And then subtly mimic people during the interview and throughout the job search process by mirroring them. This can be a little more difficult. If you're good at it, you can do it. If somebody tends to lean back, you may want to lean a little bit more back. What I like mainly about that is if they're talking numbers, shift and start talking more numbers. If they're talking more soft skills, then go in that direction. So go and really be reading what's going on. And then use care to answer behavioral interviewing questions. So behavioral interviewing question would be, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult client. And so this would be where you say, what was the challenge? Here's the action I took. Here are the results. And here's the emotional part is connecting it to it. I chose this particular example because I think my skills in X, Y, and Z that I used in it are align well with this particular job, especially related to X, Y, and Z. So that ties into the emotions because it directly connects it. Okay. Do your research and weave in commonalities into your interview responses to develop a common bond with the interviewers. Find out what you know about them and where you have commonalities and bring that out. Use stories to stand out. Stories are compelling and memorable. They stick. Bring yourself and your qualifications to life. The auction part is they did an auction where they got these swap meet items, and they went and identical sort of items and at a swap meet, and they put the first items on eBay, and they didn't have any stories related to them, and they sold for, I don't know, under $10. And then they created these stories and everything, and they put the other items on that were pretty much identical to the first items. And it was some crazy number that they got just by adding the stories. Stories bring things to life. They're meaningful. They stick in people's minds, and they generate meaning in something and interest. Respond to negative questions with a positive introduction, even with a weakness question. So let's say if somebody asks you, tell me about a time when you have dealt, when you work for a difficult manager. Well, you started off by, I've always had amazing managers. I've been really fortunate. But if I have to think of an example, and then you go into that, always start a negative with a positive. And if you think long about it, you can normally do that. Okay. Take control of the interview process in a subtle and productive way. Let's say you're in an interview and you can share your resume at the start. What you could say is, I made some updates on my resume and I wanted to provide them before we get started in the interview process. I specifically added this course and I finished this certificate program. So it's a way you can actually be proactive. There's other things to do. Maybe in a Zoom interview, you're interviewing with a company that's very dog friendly. You could have somebody let your dog in and have it planned and have the dog come up, and all of a sudden you've created this bonding. Don't think of this as manipulative. If you are applying for a position, you probably think you're the most qualified person for the job. You are doing the employer a disservice if you are not showing how you should fit within the company and how good a job you can do. So never think that it's a manipulative thing, especially if you're being honest and authentic. Ask strategic questions at the end of the interview that will help you stand out and get important information. Make sure there's a long list of questions in here that are very different that provide you with information. One of the things you want to do is think about, you're a consultant and you need to come up with recommendations for them. If I'm going to come up with recommendations how they may overcome some challenges, what am I going to ask at the end of the interview? Maybe you're going to say, what are some of the main challenges that you face within the department? What are those barriers that you've come across? And maybe how does that tie into the company goals and something like that. So there's a lot of examples of that. Too many to go through. And then this, just in closing on the number 12, every interaction is a closing opportunity. Don't let any moment of separation go without doing the basics well and thinking about how to add some novelty. An example was a person in the East was with an insurance company for 40 years. And 2 weeks after he was hired, they let him know that it came down to 2 candidates. He was one of them, and there was another candidate. And they couldn't decide who to hire. And so they went to the office assistant who the candidates each set by before they were called in for the interview. And they asked the office assistant, who do you want to hire? And this person developed 40 years with a company based on developing rapport at a time when most people think it's an insignificant to the entire process. So never let those peripheral moments go. Okay. And so just an important note here, some of the steps, advice, and tactics and ideas presented may not be appropriate for unique job search. Federal government and international jobs are an example. You got to really follow the rules on those things, and international jobs have different requirements and different things like that. A lot of this applies, but a number of things might not, and you want to make sure that you look into that. Use your best judgment, always seek professional help when needed, and always uncover what is important to each employer so you are addressing the company's needs and implementing the most appropriate strategies. Okay. And so you're probably all asking, well, how do I figure out who the hiring manager is? If I'm supposed to get the documents in front of them. And I wanted to let you know on the website, slamdunkjobsearch.com, there is, if you sign up for the blog, there is you'll get kicked out a document that will have guide to locating the hiring manager's name and email addresses. And there's a lot of tactics you can do, and a lot of different platforms you can use, and different things like that. So I wanted you all to be aware of that. And then the other thing is that the book and ebook I have kept I've given a few talks during this month, and I purposely put the ebook at $2.99. so that the people that are listening to this or want to get it at a really good price, that's available to you. Once again, it's not about me, anything for me. It's about really giving to other people. And this is a way I think to give back to all of you, is to bring having that $2.99. The book is also on there. I like the book a little bit better. It's not environmentally friendly, of course, but I like because it's got pull quotes, it has an index and things like that. But the ebook has the same content and everything else. And so those are available at Amazon. And then yeah, just we wanted to open it up and leave time for questions and see how else we can help you out. So I hope that wasn't too much of a whirlwind. And anyway, I wanted to bring it back. And Julie, I don't know if we've got some questions or not.
We do have some questions, and I'm going to ask Arushi to make me host so I can actually share my video once again. And
yeah, in each of those areas too, the book goes into detail, and it goes into a lot of email examples and a lot of different things like that. That was put in there to really help people. The other thing that was not included, and I just knew I wouldn't have time for it, was the job offer stage. And I added that at the end, and I wanted to make sure that that was there, because to go to A to Z, you really have to go through the job. How do you negotiate? And that's in there. And I bring some unique things in there, some innovative things that a lot of other people haven't brought, haven't heard before. Okay.
Well, Dave, that was incredible. And I am looking forward to reading your book so I can share a lot of these wonderful recommendations through my position with Alumni Affairs. Super, super helpful. We do have some.
Great, thank you.
But before we move on to questions, I do have some exciting announcements. We do have 5 winners of your book. I'm just going to announce your first name, and then we're going to drop the information in the chat so you all can see. Delwyn, Mia, Shom, Arvind, and Adelaide are the winners of your book, which is really exciting.
And I'll be signed.
And yes.
Not that means a lot.
No, actually, that is a bonus. That is a bonus. So Arushi's going to message you all directly to figure out the best way to get those books in your hand.
Right.
And then now I have the great privilege of asking some really wonderful questions that came through the Q&A. And the first one, Dave, is from Marilyn. And says, "Hi, Dave. I love the book. Can you talk a little bit about the ice cream cone approach to introduce yourself? She's working on a draft of her own and would love an example and some additional insight."
Yeah. So the ice, we've called it somewhat the funnel. I've always called it the ice cream cone approach, because the way I drew it up, I did all the drawings and the illustrations in the book, and I've had to keep it somewhat. It started looking like an ice cream, so I kept it that way. But what it really is when you get in anything you do, it's like even writing a paper or doing a presentation. You sort of write that overall, the kind of an umbrella about what are you going to talk about, and then you sort of bring it down, and somewhat like a funnel. And come down. And so what the way the ice cream cone approach is, if somebody says, "Why don't you tell me about yourself?" You start it with a framing statement that I'm interested in helping people do this, or my goal is to do this, or I'm here for this reason, or this is what. And then what you do is, because stories are so compelling, you go to that story and you talk about where did that start? How did you become interested in that? And that could have been when you were really young. It could have been when you were in college. It could have been when you were in a graduate program. It could have been when you were working and at a different stage. But you bring that to life about, this is why I'm interested in it. And then what you do is you talk about the different steps that you've taken to get to where you are today. And you could be selective on what you pick, but that could be, I went to this school, I went to a graduate program, I went and started working here, and I picked up this credential, I did this. And that's what's brought me to where I am today, and why I'm so excited about this position, because all my background aligns really well. In addition to that, I bring something on the personal side. When I was I enjoy painting, oil painting. And when I've won some contests and some other things, and in any job that I'm part of, I bring that creativity in the job. And when I was at X, Y, and Z and running the marketing campaign, I brought in a lot of that creativity and it increased participation by 20%. So you bring those things through framing, story, what you did on the steps. Maybe then you tie it in with something personal that brings you to life and ties into the position. So anyway, just an easier way to go. And it seems to work well in a question that's very difficult for a lot of people.
It's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, great
the next,
question.
are you ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is from Anonymous. Do you suggest attaching transcripts, certifications, et cetera, to applications?
Yeah, that's one thing I talk a lot about in the book is that the job search process is not black and white. It's very gray. There's a lot, you've got to use your judgment. And I rarely have seen that in any job search book, because a lot of what I talk about doesn't come from the career side. It comes from sales, marketing, art. It comes from everything except for the career development side. And so, you have to use your best judgment. If you feel like it's overkill and it's just too much, if they're not asking for it, is it going to add a lot of value? Is it going to seem like it's a little much? I think you always want to just ask yourself, does it add value? Is it the right time for it? And things like that. But yeah, if it's a certificate, can you incorporate that into your documents? Can you write that into your cover letter that you have that? Do you have to actually attach a certificate? Probably not. That can be a little bit of an overkill, but that way, or a little bit too much. And if you're forcing it too much on that, transcripts, a lot of times you might have to submit them because they ask for them, and they might want that. Otherwise, you might want to put your GPA on your documents and have it that way. And then if they ask for that, or if you think there's an opening later on, you could, as you learn more about it, you can go and do it at that point. But I would say use your best judgment on depending upon what they're looking for, the type of company, and different things that way.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Our next question is coming from Connor. He asks, for career changes, how do you suggest standing out so that the experience requirement is irrelevant?
Say that again at the end, that the experience requirement is
irrelevant. So they forget that there's an experience requirement because they're so wowed by you.
Yeah. So there's so many things I had in the book that I took out that I got into everything. It was these things in the movie industry, you name it. And I'm always thinking about things about, that what you do is you distract them with what you do have. And you try to go with those things. Well, where can I have a competitive advantage? The other thing, the more targeted you can get, the better, because you'll separate yourself that way. The other thing is that the way you overcome anything is by getting in the door some other way. So the way you can have a resume that's not ideal, or a cover letter that's not as strong, you become an insider. You connect with people. If you can connect with them and they like you and see your passion and really want to, you ask good questions and everything else, they're going to overlook a lot of a lot of those things, and they'll bring you in because they want somebody that's, has a good work ethic, is motivated, is passionate about what they do, and all of that. So those are things to do there. Transferable skills are key. You can build that up in a lot of different ways in your skills section and things like that. Bring in, make sure you bring those out in the bullets that you have, and things that tie in. Put that job announcement into WordSift or into ChatGPT and have it pull out the most important things and make sure you're addressing those things. But I think the key thing is really get into those organizations and connect with people that you want to, where you want to be, and become an insider. And that's really important. And it could be just, you want to reach out to somebody and find out, how do you become more marketable? You really love the work that they're doing. You're bought into their mission and you want to eventually end up in the company, and you wondered if maybe they would have a few minutes to give you some advice on the best ways to get in to the organization. You might want to find somebody on LinkedIn that you're connected with that maybe went to your alma mater, or, UCSB. So yeah, there are a few ways that way. I hope I interpreted that the right way, though. Okay.
I mean, it sounds like what the the Gaucho was looking for. Can't speak for them,
Right.
but it sounded good. Thank you also for the plug for LinkedIn. For those of you who don't know, we do have a group. It's the UC Santa Barbara Alumni group on LinkedIn, and there are like 28,000 Gauchos on that space. So it's a great place to connect and do this type of work and ask for these types of suggestions. Become an insider. So our next question is, some of the recommendations lean towards an in-person interview process. Does the book also include ideas, recommendations for applying and securing remote positions?
Yeah. So I guess we're talking actually about positions in remote, remote versus in person. I mean, one thing that you keep in mind is that there is a trend, and this is typically happens. I see this in a lot of different areas, is that you get the extreme when things happen. And then what happens is they start to move back toward the middle. They never settle back at the middle where they were originally, but we're starting to see that more and more, where more companies are wanting to get people back into the workforce. So you're seeing them settle in at about that hybrid area that way. There's LinkedIn as ways that you can uncover that, go after remote positions. You can, some announcements have them and will say on it that, fully remote, or they'll talk about that. The job search process, though, is the same if we're competing for a remote position versus an in-person. The only difference would be is, how do you answer the question? If they say, if they ask you questions about where do you function better, are you better, with people, or, without, independently, or something like that, you're going to have to play into the culture of the company and to see what fits best for you. And they may ask you questions about that, about, are you capable of really working remotely on your own, and that sort of thing. And then, there's questions about that. But in terms of the job search process, it's pretty much the book works the same way with that. The difference would be is, you could be connecting with people. If you become an insider, you can also find out early, before even a position is announced, if how they function. Do they function as a remote company, or they function as an in-person company, or a hybrid? So that's another thing that you can do that way. So hopefully, if you put it back in the chat if I'm not addressing that specifically what you mean, but I think the process works the same no matter what you're doing. Where you're finding those opportunities might vary a little bit, and there's various sites that will actually, you can look that up, including LinkedIn, where you can actually put in, I want a remote, and it will pull up those announcements for remote positions that way.
That's great. Thank you, Dave.
Uh-huh.
So the next question is about follow-up. How much follow-up is too much follow-up?
So there is a process. So if you're doing the what I call the brief question and answer advising sessions, where you're really reaching out and asking people about questions and getting advice, you want to make sure you're following up on that. And there's a process in the book. It's called the flower bulb follow-up approach. And what that is that a lot of people don't thank people for what the help they get, and even a thank you note. 57%, anyway, 57 to 70% of applicants do not send a thank you note after an interview. It's staggering. So this is, but when you read the book, the mindset will shift, because what you want to do is, you always want to be thinking, if I've got an opportunity to develop a closer relationship to a hiring manager or to somebody in the company, I need to take that I need to make sure I develop that and go after that. Because what we want you to do is think long term. It's not just about this. If you don't get that position, that's fine. You've developed now a contact in that company that's going to be part of your lifelong network. So you always want to try to develop a closer relationship. So you always want to contact them and follow up. The the flower bulb approach is is three thank you. You thank them initially. And what you do then, you come back and you tell them, you thank them again down the line when you reached a milestone. Thank you again. I want to let you know that I was able to do this or take these courses that you recommended. Really appreciate it. And then the third one is going to be a follow-up to thank them again and say, I reached my milestone, I got this job, and that sort of thing. So in terms of the piece of going in and doing informational meetings, that's would be that approach. For a follow-up on an interview, a thank you note is what you want to do. Electronic is fine, but what you might want to do if you want to go above and beyond is maybe you send an electronic thank you right away within 3 to 6 hours, and then you send a handwritten note if you think the company would value that. And a handwritten note's going to sit on my bookshelf, it's going to sit on my desk, whereas the electronic one won't. So it's a way to add a little bit of a touch, but some companies may not value it. Fast-paced companies might not be as much, but traditional companies might value that. So something to think about.
Yeah, there's another question, actually, a follow-up to that. Follow-up, sorry. So, when does follow-up to an employer, say that you've gone through the interview process, right? And you're eager to hear like what the results are of the interview, if you got the job. At what point does it become the passion and eagerness turn into pestering? Is there some sort of like magical number of follow-up emails or calls? Do you have any recommendations there?
So I'm glad you said that, because that may have even clarified the earlier question about following up. You definitely want to follow up. Recruiters like when you do check in, but what the approach has been, once again, this is coming back to having you shift your thinking. It's about customer service. It's not about asking what's in it for me. That's not what it's about. It's about how can I help the employer? So as you go through and you shift that thinking about how can I help the employer, when the job offer's on the table, that power will shift there and you can start asking more questions. But what you want to do is when you go and check back in, it's not about you asking about what's in it for me, about the timeline. It's I wanted to dear so-and-so, thank you again for meeting with me back on this date. Since it's been about a little over a week, I wanted to check back in and see if you had any additional questions or see if there's anything else that I can provide or help during the hiring process. Please feel free to reach out if there's anything more I can do. I look forward to hearing from you. Still very, very interested in the position. So if they're interested in you, they're going to get back with you. If they're stressed, they're not going to feel like, oh, this person's nagging me, I got to get back to them, but I really don't have the time to get back to them. But if they like you and everything else, they're going to appreciate that type of message rather than, oh, when am I going to hear back from you, or where are you in the process, and that sort of thing. Just check back in and see what you can do to help them. It's a totally different mindset.
Yeah, you really like flipped it there. I love that. So we have time for 2 more questions.
Right.
The first of 2, is there such a thing as being overly taudacious? I dropped by unannounced the NPR headquarters to drop off my resume to the hiring director. This receptionist wasn't too fond of the move, to say the least. Any advice or comments you'd like to share?
Well, I think that's good that you're bringing that up, because it's like I said, you have to use your best judgment. You need to know your audience. There are things when you say be different and memorable. There are things in industries where you do need to be very creative. You do need to try things like that. You need to send a creative resume, and maybe you send a standard resume, but you send a creative one along with it or something. Sometimes those things can pay off for you. Years ago, it used to be a little bit more that was the case, that you'd walk in the door and you'd be able to hand it and they would be fine with that. Now, since everything's so online and there are more security measures and different things, and it can be a little bit different, but my suggestion is get your documents into the hiring manager, and if that's what it takes. And there's a way you can get it in that way, you can do that. You're taking a risk, but sometimes a risk can pay off for you, and you can do it. Like an example is one person we hired, I came back the next day and she had put thank you notes on each of our doors. So we had outside doors, so you could do that. In a lot of places you might not do that, or maybe you give it to the front desk and they go and put it in the boxes of everyone. So a handwritten note or something. Those things I think work. Walking a resume in, I think it can work and can be a little different. One thing you could do is send a resume through the mail. That'd be another thing, because a lot of people don't do that. And there's a story in the book of doing that, and where it's different. And the story is actually a mistake that was made and how the person recovered from it. But yeah, use your best judgment, but think about maybe there's some alternative ways that you can do it that are just as effective, that may not be seen in a negative light that way. Or maybe you take a risk and it pays off for you. So it's hard to say, but just know your audience, use your best judgment. I give you credit for doing it. And it may have got to the person. You may be surprised. You may get a call out of it.
Wow.
Because it shows interest.
Yeah. The notes on the doors, that's really cool.
Yeah. It was nice.
Okay. So final question.
Yeah.
Could you share your insights on the most effective process for job seekers who are looking for employment opportunities in another state?
Yeah. So that's, now it's a lot of it depends too on what it is. Like going back to the remote question, if it's remote, it may not be a problem. And a lot of initial interviews are happening through Zoom and through other means, remotely. The key thing there would be that you could be seen as more expensive because, they might have to fly you out on the final interview. They might have to relocate you. So the more you can show a couple things, and one thing I didn't, well, the more you can show that you either know about that area in that state, that's important. So I have an example in the book about you're in California and you're interested in a job going to Seattle. So sunny Southern California going to wet Seattle area, weather's very different. How are you going to convince them that you're the person for the position? So there's a whole list of things there. And one thing you always have to remember is your job is to minimize the risk of bringing you on. What a lot of recruiters do is we think in terms of risks. How risky is this person going to be, bringing them on and they're going to leave in a very short period of time? And one of the biggest risks of when I was a recruiter, when we did exit interviews, was somebody coming from outside the area. And so what you want to do is you want to show that area. There's a good reason why you want to be there. Somebody there, you have family there, you have friends there. And so there's some example on email messages in the book that say that. Oh, in addition to that, I'm excited to come to the Boston area because I have a number of family members that are there. I love visiting. So you sort of build that in. The other thing is if you can build an address in. So you're not just giving your let's say California address or wherever it is, you're building an address in there so they know that you're familiar with that area and you're maybe in the local area. You have to be careful that you don't just use the one address because, and when I mean address, I mean city and state. You don't want to put your full address. But the problem with that could be they think you're there, and then when they find out you're not, they could be, so maybe you put two locations, a permanent and a local, and you do it that way. So the more you can show though that you know about where you're going, you have some people there, you've been there before, you're really interested in getting there. Otherwise, it's like you could come here and for all I know, you maybe visited it once, but yet now you're going to come here and you may leave in 6 months because you just don't like it at all. Maybe they're the bugs, the humidity, who knows, it's different than California. So you got to be careful because that's one of the biggest risks in hiring is people from outside the local area. And so we always used to look for, do they know somebody here? Are they familiar with the high prices in California, the cost of housing, and things like that. So try to overcome and always think about how do I minimize the risk of anything they might be thinking about that could be a warning sign in my background. How do I overcome that so I anticipate what they're looking for and that I can make it that not be a problem.
Wonderful. Super smart tips. Thank you so much for your time, Dave. On behalf of the Alumni Affairs, thank you for sharing your incredible expertise. Just as a reminder, you can find Dave's book on Amazon to learn more about how you can make your job search a slam dunk. And thank you for joining us tonight, for staying a couple minutes over to hear this great advice. I want to thank Liz and Arushi for helping us behind the scenes. Remind everyone that to join our group on LinkedIn and to join Gaucho Network and to have a wonderful evening. We'll be sending out the recording soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate all the questions too.
Thank you so much, Dave.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.